The jogger stopped breathing. Not from exhaustion. Rowan Blackwell could run Manhattan twice without breaking stride. No. What stole his breath stood 20 feet away near Bethesda Fountain. 3 small faces that carried pieces of his soul. 2 boys. 1 girl. Maybe 2.5 years old. Those eyes. His grandmother's steel gray. That jawline. The Blackwell curse that photographers loved. The way the smallest one tilted his head while studying a pigeon. Rowan did that exact motion in every boardroom when someone pitched nonsense. The woman pushing their stroller wore a burgundy coat he'd never seen, but he knew those hands. Steady hands that once plated 40-course dinners without trembling. Hands that touched his face during a snowstorm 3 years ago, right before his pride destroyed everything. Nia Reed, the chef who walked away. The woman who never begged, never called, never looked back. Standing in Central Park with 3 children who had his DNA written across their faces. What would you do if the love you mocked came back with proof you couldn't ignore? If the person you pushed away returned, not asking for apologies, not demanding money, just living their life while raising your children you never knew existed? Some of you watching know this weight. Maybe you're the one who left, protecting your peace and your babies. Maybe you're the one who stayed blind, building empires while missing what mattered. Or maybe you're somewhere between, wondering if broken things can heal when little hearts depend on it. This isn't just another billionaire romance where money fixes mistakes. This is about Rowan Blackwell, a man who called love corporate weakness until 3 toddlers made him question every choice. About Nia Reed, who chose dignity over drama, building a life that never needed his billions. About what happens when pride meets proof, when power meets purpose, when a mocked heart returns stronger than steel. Welcome back to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, where love teaches harder lessons than any boardroom. If you're new here, you've found the place where real transformation happens, not through magic or manipulation, but through messy, beautiful truth. Today's story will grip your heart and refuse to let go. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Why? Because every week, I bring you stories that matter. Stories about second chances that require first changes, about women who know their worth and men who learn theirs, about families built on respect, not just attraction. When you subscribe, you join thousands who believe love should elevate, not diminish. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That coming back isn't about forgetting, it's about forgiving with boundaries intact. Your subscription helps these messages reach hearts that need them most. Rowan Blackwell owned half of Manhattan but couldn't own his mistakes. He built billion-dollar companies while destroying million-dollar hearts. How many of you have worked for someone who treated success like a weapon? Who confused power with worth? Or maybe you've been the one hiding behind achievements, afraid that without them, nobody would stay. Here's the problem nobody talks about. When you mock love long enough, it stops knocking. When you choose pride over people, you wake up alone in penthouses that echo. Rowan learned this the hardest way possible, through 3 small faces that proved love doesn't wait for permission to create life. But what happens when the woman you dismissed becomes the mother you never expected? When the chef you underestimated builds a family that doesn't need your empire? When your children exist in a world you never knew, thriving without your name or your money? The answer will challenge everything you think you know about power, parenthood, and second chances. This story will take you from New York's glittering towers to New Orleans' healing kitchens. You'll witness a man who laughed at wedding vows learn to change diapers at 3 a.m. A woman who left with nothing but her dignity returns with everything that matters. 3 children who never asked to exist become the teachers their father never knew he needed. You'll see what real accountability looks like when cameras aren't rolling. How trust rebuilds one small promise at a time. Why some apologies require years of proof, not just words. How a kitchen table becomes more valuable than any boardroom when the right people sit around it. By the end, you'll understand why Nia never fought for Rowan's attention. She was too busy building a life worthy of her children's respect. Why Rowan's empire nearly crumbled before his heart could grow. And why sometimes, the love you mock returns not to punish you, but to teach you what you were always meant to become. Let's begin where pride meets its match. Blackwell Tower pierced Manhattan's skyline like a steel declaration. 68 floors of glass and ambition, where Rowan Blackwell ruled from. The top with the precision of a surgeon and the warmth of winter concrete. His empire stretched across 3 continents, logistics networks that moved billions in goods, media platforms that shaped public opinion, and tech startups that disrupted entire industries before breakfast. The man himself moved through his domain like controlled lightning, 6'2", sharp suits that cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that calculated profit margins while others exchanged pleasantries. Board meetings were battlefields where Rowan never lost. He spoke in numbers, thought in quarterly projections, and measured success by how many competitors he left behind. "Love is a luxury we can't afford," he told his executive team during a merger discussion. "Emotions cloud judgment. Sentiment kills deals. While our competitors waste time on feelings, we focus on fundamentals." The room nodded in unison. They always did. His penthouse office overlooked Central Park, but Rowan rarely noticed the trees. Windows were for light, not daydreaming. His desk held 3 monitors, 2 phones, and 0 personal photos. The only decoration was a crystal award from Forbes, youngest CEO to triple company value in 5 years. He'd earned it by cutting costs others wouldn't touch, making decisions others couldn't stomach. Rowan's childhood had prepared him for this isolation. Connecticut boarding schools where hugs were weakness and tears were failure. A father who spoke only about stock prices, and a mother who smiled for charity photographers, but never for her son. He learned early that people left, deals lasted, and emotions were expensive mistakes. At 32, he'd never been in love. He'd been in arrangements, beautiful women who understood the transaction, who looked perfect at galas and asked no questions about his heart. They lasted 6 months maximum before he grew bored, or they grew attached. Both outcomes annoyed him equally. "Relationships are mergers that always fail," he explained to a journalist, profiling him for Fortune. "I've seen too many brilliant men destroyed by divorce settlements and custody battles. I prefer investments that appreciate, not depreciate." His staff whispered about his coldness, but they cashed generous paychecks and kept quiet. His competitors called him ruthless, but they studied his strategies and copied his methods. His board members feared his temper, but they loved his results. Every morning at 5 a.m., Rowan reviewed global markets while running on his private treadmill. No music, no distractions, just numbers flowing across screens like digital prayers. He ate the same breakfast, black coffee, steel-cut oats, and whatever his private chef prepared. He never learned her name. Staff were functions, not people. By 6 a.m., he was dressed and reviewing acquisition targets. By 7 a.m., he was making calls to London and Tokyo. By 8 a.m., he was in his first meeting, setting the tone for another day of controlled dominance. Lunch was protein bars between conference calls. Dinner was business meals, where he closed deals while others enjoyed wine. This was power. This was a success. This was the life Rowan Blackwell had built by rejecting everything that made other men weak. He owned buildings, companies, and politicians. He controlled markets, influenced elections, and shaped economies. What he didn't control was walking into his kitchen one evening and meeting a woman whose hands moved like poetry while she worked. Nia Reed moved through kitchens like music made visible. Her hands knew the weight of salt before measuring, the doneness of meat before touching, the readiness of sauce before tasting. At 26, she'd already worked under 3 James Beard winners and earned respect in kitchens where respect was currency harder than cash. She came from Queens, where her mother Delilah ran Reed's Corner Diner on Jamaica Avenue. 48 seats, cracked vinyl booths, and the best breakfast in 3 zip codes. Nia learned to cook on a 6-burner gas range that wheezed like an old man but never quit. She learned seasoning from her grandmother's whispered instructions and knife, skills from YouTube videos watched on a phone propped against flour canisters. Food is love made edible, Delilah taught her daughter while flipping pancakes for the morning rush. Every plate tells someone they matter. Every meal says you belong here. Never forget that, baby girl. Nia never did. Even when she moved to Manhattan and worked in restaurants where plates cost more than her mother's daily revenue, she carried that philosophy. Food wasn't just fuel or art, it was a connection. It was the universal language that said, "I see you, I care about you, I want you to feel good." Her knife work was meditation. Julienne carrots fell like golden matchsticks. Diced onions formed perfect cubes that would dissolve into silk when heated. She could break down a whole chicken in 90 seconds, fillet a fish without wasting an ounce, and turn simple vegetables into symphonies of color and texture. But technique was just the foundation. Naya's gift was intuition. She tasted with her eyes, seasoned with her heart, and plated with the precision of someone who understood that presentation was the first bite. Her food made people close their eyes and remember their grandmother's kitchen, their first date, their childhood home. The recruitment agency found her at Le Bernardin, where she'd worked her way up from prep cook to sous chef in 18 months. Private position, they said. Demanding client. Excellent pay. Discretion required. She almost said no. Private chefs often meant spoiled rich people who treated staff like furniture. But her mother needed surgery. The diner's insurance wouldn't cover experimental treatments. Naya needed money fast, and this job paid 3 times her restaurant salary. Her first day at Blackwell Tower, she studied the penthouse kitchen like a general surveying battlefield terrain. Professional-grade everything, wolf ranges, sub-zero refrigeration, marble countertops that stayed cool for pastry work. The pantry was stocked with ingredients most chefs only dreamed about: real vanilla beans, aged balsamic, truffle oil that actually contained truffles. She unpacked her knife roll, 8 blades wrapped in worn canvas, each one an extension of her hands. The kitchen felt cold despite the expensive equipment. No family photos on the refrigerator. No cookbooks with food-stained pages. No signs that anyone actually lived here. Naya tied her apron and got to work. She'd cook for this stranger, save money for her mother's treatment, and maintain the professional distance that kept her safe. She had no idea she was about to meet a man who would challenge every boundary she'd ever built. The first collision happened over salmon. Naya had prepared wild Alaskan king salmon with lemon-thyme butter, roasted fingerling, potatoes, and asparagus so perfectly green it looked like spring itself. She arranged the plate with the care of a museum curator, each element positioned to complement the others. Rowan entered the kitchen at exactly 7:30 p.m., still wearing his suit jacket despite being home. He moved with the efficiency of someone who viewed meals as necessary interruptions to productivity. His phone buzzed constantly. Tokyo markets opening, London deals closing, Los Angeles meetings starting. "The salmon," he said without looking up from his screen. "What's the protein content per serving?" Naya paused, tongs still in hand. Most clients asked if dinner was ready. Some asked about ingredients due to allergies. None had ever asked about macronutrient breakdowns. "Approximately 35 grams, she replied, watching him type notes into his phone. "The preparation method preserves the omega-3 fatty acids while..." Good. Efficient fuel. He took the plate and headed toward his office. "Sir?" Naya's voice stopped him at the doorway. The meal was designed to be enjoyed warmly. The butter sauce will separate if it sits. Rowan looked at her directly for the first time. She stood with perfect posture, chef's whites crisp despite hours of cooking, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes held steady confidence. Not defiant, but unafraid. "I have a conference call with Singapore in 3 minutes, he said. "The call will still happen if you take 5 minutes to taste what you're eating." Something in her tone made him stop. Not pleading or demanding, just matter of fact, like she was stating a law of physics rather than making a request. He set his phone on the counter and cut a piece of salmon. The fish flaked perfectly, releasing steam that carried hints of lemon and herbs. He chewed slowly, and for the first time in months, actually tasted his food. He paused, searching for business terminology to describe something that had nothing to do with profit margins. "Well executed." Naya almost smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. The potatoes have a good texture, firm but not undercooked. They're fingerlings from a farm upstate. The soil gives them a different mineral profile than standard russets." Rowan found himself taking another bite, then another. The asparagus had a slight char that added smokiness without bitterness. The sauce enhanced rather than masked the salmon's natural flavor. This wasn't just fuel, it was craftsmanship. "How long have you been cooking professionally?" he asked. 8 years. "I started washing dishes at my mother's diner when I was 16. And now you're here. Now I'm here." They stood in silence for a moment, the kitchen humming with the quiet efficiency of expensive appliances. Rowan's phone buzzed again. Singapore wouldn't wait forever. "I should take this call," he said, but he didn't move immediately. "Of course. I'll keep your dinner warm." He nodded and walked away, but something had shifted. For the first time in years, Rowan Blackwell had tasted something that couldn't be quantified in spreadsheets. Over the following weeks, their interactions developed a rhythm. Naya would prepare meals that transformed simple ingredients into experiences. Rowan would eat while reviewing contracts, occasionally pausing to ask technical questions about cooking methods or nutritional content. She answered with the patience of someone who understood that curiosity, even clinical curiosity, was better than indifference. But something was changing in the sterile perfection of his penthouse. The kitchen began to smell like home, garlic sautéing in olive oil, fresh herbs releasing their oils, bread warming in the oven. Naya brought life to spaces that had only known efficiency. She worked with quiet intensity, never rushing but never wasting motion. When she diced vegetables, the knife moved in steady rhythm against the cutting board. When she stirred sauces, her wrist moved in small circles that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. Rowan found himself lingering in the kitchen longer than necessary, watching her work with the same focus he usually reserved for market analysis. "You approach cooking like I approach acquisitions," he observed one evening, watching her prepare a reduction sauce. "Methodical, precise. The difference," Naya replied without looking up, "is that I'm creating something that brings joy." "What does your precision create?" The question caught him off guard. "Profit, growth, jobs for thousands of people. And does that bring you joy?" Rowan considered this while she tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning, and tasted again. Joy wasn't a metric he tracked. Success was measurable: stock prices, revenue growth, market share. Joy was subjective, unreliable, irrelevant to quarterly reports. "Joy is a luxury," he said finally. "I focus on results." Naya turned to face him, a wooden spoon still in her hand. "What if joy is the result that matters most?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. Another deal, another crisis, another opportunity to prove that emotions were expensive distractions. He took the call and walked away. But her question followed him. That night, alone in his office, overlooking the city that never slept, Rowan found himself thinking about the difference between feeding and nourishing. Naya didn't just prepare food. She created moments of comfort in a world that offered little. Her meals made him slow down, pay attention, exist in the present instead of constantly calculating the future. But slowing down was dangerous. Paying attention to feelings was a weakness. Existing in the present meant missing opportunities that competitors would seize. Here's what I want to know from you watching this. Have you ever met someone who made you question everything you thought you wanted? Someone whose presence challenged the walls you built to protect yourself? Maybe it was a coworker who showed kindness in a cutthroat environment. Maybe a friend who chose peace over profit. Maybe someone who looked at your achievements and asked, "But are you happy?" Drop a comment and tell me about that person. Because what happened next between Rowan and Naya will show you why some people enter our lives not to fit into our plans, but to help us build better ones. December arrived in Manhattan with the subtlety of a hostile takeover. Snow threatened daily, and the city moved with the tense energy of people preparing for battle. Rowan's schedule intensified as year-end deals demanded closure and quarterly reports required perfection. He worked 16-hour days, survived on caffeine and determination, and barely noticed the world outside his office windows. But he noticed Naya. She adapted to his brutal schedule without complaint, arriving earlier to prepare meals he could eat. Between meetings, staying later to ensure he had something warm waiting when he finally came home. Her presence became the one constant in days that shifted like quicksand. She learned his preferences without being told. Coffee black, no sugar. Protein-heavy lunches that wouldn't make him sluggish during afternoon presentations. Dinners that could be reheated without losing flavor when meetings ran late. She anticipated his needs with the efficiency of a world-class assistant and the care of someone who actually gave a damn. "You don't have to stay this late," he told her one evening, finding her cleaning the kitchen at nearly midnight. "I can manage." "When did you last eat something that wasn't a protein bar?" she asked, not pausing in her work. He couldn't remember. Days blurred together when you lived on adrenaline and ambition. "There's soup in the refrigerator," she continued. "Tomato basil. It'll take 3 minutes in the microwave. I'm not hungry. She stopped cleaning and looked at him directly. Mr. Blackwell, when did you last feel hungry? Actually feel it, not just realize you needed fuel? Another question that had no business being so complicated. Hunger was a biological signal, easily managed with efficient nutrition. Feeling hungry implied paying attention to physical sensations, which was time better spent on productive activities. I don't have time for feelings, he said. Hunger isn't a feeling. It's your body asking for care. The word care hung in the air between them like an unfamiliar language. Rowan understood maintenance, regular exercise, adequate sleep, proper nutrition. But care implied something softer, more personal, more dangerous. I should let you get home, he said, stepping back toward the safety of his office. Mr. Blackwell. Her voice stopped him again. The soup really is good. And you look tired. He was tired. Bone-deep, soul-level exhausted in ways that sleep couldn't fix. But admitting fatigue was admitting weakness, and weakness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Thank you for staying late, he said instead. It's my job. But they both knew it wasn't. Her job was cooking, not caring. Her job was preparing meals, not preparing him for the storm that was coming. Her job was maintaining professional distance, not bridging the gap between his hunger and his heart. As she gathered her things and headed for the elevator, Rowan stood in his empty kitchen and wondered when feeding himself had become so complicated. Outside, snow began to fall, the first real storm of winter, arriving right on schedule. The blizzard hit Manhattan like nature's hostile takeover, swift and merciless. By 6 p.m., the city that never slept was forced into an unwilling hibernation. Flights grounded at LaGuardia and JFK. Subways suspended service. Even the most determined taxi drivers surrendered to streets that had become rivers of white. Rowan stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the storm transform his empire into a snow globe. Central Park disappeared under blankets of white. The streets below, usually rivers of yellow cabs and hurried pedestrians, lay empty except for the occasional snowplow fighting a losing battle against nature's persistence. His phone buzzed with cancellations. The Japanese investors couldn't make it from their hotel. The merger dinner at Le Bernardin was postponed. 3 board members were stranded at airports across the tri-state area. For the first time in years, Rowan's carefully orchestrated schedule crumbled beyond his control. Sir? Naya's voice came from the kitchen doorway. The catering staff can't make it through the storm. It's just us tonight. Just us. The words carried weight neither of them acknowledged. The penthouse, usually buzzing with assistants, security personnel, and various staff members, had emptied as the storm intensified. Even his housekeeper had left early, muttering about getting home before the train stopped running. I can manage on my own, Rowan said, though he wasn't sure what managing meant when his usual dinner was a business meeting with carefully planned conversations and strategic networking. When did you last cook for yourself? Naya asked, stepping into the living room. She'd changed from her chef's whites into jeans and a cream sweater, looking more like a person and less like staff. I don't cook. Ever? I have people for that. She gestured toward the empty penthouse. Not tonight. You don't. The storm howled against the windows, and for a moment, the lights flickered. Emergency generators would kick in if needed, but the brief darkness reminded them both how isolated they were. 68 floors above a city that had gone to sleep, with nothing but wind and snow for company. I could teach you, Naya offered. Something simple. Comfort food for a night like this. Rowan almost refused. He had work to catch up on, calls to make to international markets that didn't care about New York weather. But something about the storm's intensity, the unusual quiet of his normally busy home, made him pause. What did you have in mind? Tomato soup, grilled cheese, nothing complicated, but perfect for tonight. He found himself nodding before his rational mind could object. Fine, but I have calls to make afterward. Naya smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her that wasn't politely professional. Of course you do. They moved to the kitchen together, and Rowan felt oddly out of place in his own space. This room where he grabbed coffee and protein bars suddenly seemed foreign when approached with actual cooking in mind. First rule, Naya said, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Wash your hands. Always. I know basic hygiene. Cooking hygiene is different. You're about to handle food that someone will eat. That someone is you, so you should care about doing it right. She demonstrated proper hand washing, longer than he expected, more thorough than seemed necessary. But he followed her lead, scrubbing his hands while she arranged canned tomatoes, fresh basil, cream, and bread on the marble counter. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury. Inside, something shifted as Rowan Blackwell prepared to learn his first cooking lesson from a woman who was about to teach him more than just how to make soup. The city might be paralyzed, but in this kitchen, something was beginning to move. Knife skills first, Naya said, placing a chef's knife in Rowan's hand. Hold it like you mean it, but don't strangle it. His grip was too tight, too controlled. Everything about Rowan was too controlled. She moved behind him, her hands covering his, adjusting his fingers on the handle. The contact was professional, instructional, but electricity ran between them anyway. Feel the weight, she murmured, guiding his hand through the motion of chopping onions. Let the knife do the work. Her breath was warm against his shoulder. He could smell her shampoo, something clean and simple, not the expensive perfumes he was used to. When she stepped back, he missed her presence immediately. Now you try. His first attempts were clumsy. Uneven pieces, awkward angles, but Naya was patient, correcting his technique without making him feel incompetent. Slowly, his movements became more fluid. Better, she said, and her approval meant more than it should have. They worked side by side, Naya guiding him through each step, sautéing onions until they turned translucent, adding garlic that filled the kitchen with warmth, crushing tomatoes by hand, the juice staining their fingers red. Why cooking? Rowan asked as they waited for the soup to simmer. You could have done anything. Food is honest, Naya replied, stirring the pot. You can't fake good flavor. You can't manipulate ingredients into being something they're not. Either you respect them and create something beautiful, or you don't. Sounds like business. No, she said firmly. Business is about winning. Cooking is about nourishing. The grilled cheese came next. Butter in the pan, bread layered with cheese, the satisfying sizzle as it hit the heat. Rowan flipped his sandwich too early and it fell apart. Naya laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. Patience, she said. Good things take time. When they finally sat down to eat, the storm still raging outside, Rowan tasted something he'd never experienced before. Not just the food, though the soup was perfect, rich and comforting, but the satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. This is... He started, then stopped. Good, different. They ate in comfortable silence, the kitchen warm and golden while the world outside remained cold and white. Naya told him stories about her mother's diner, about learning to cook on equipment held together with determination and duct tape. Rowan found himself sharing memories he'd buried, boarding school holidays, spent alone, the loneliness of success, the weight of always being watched. When the wine appeared, a bottle from his collection that Naya suggested, the conversation deepened. They moved to the couch in his living room, the city lights below them blurred by snow. The wine loosened tongues and lowered guards. Do you ever get tired of being perfect? Naya asked, curled into the corner of the couch, glass in hand. I'm not perfect. You try to be. Every day, every decision, every interaction. It must be exhausting. It was exhausting. But admitting that felt like admitting defeat. What's the alternative? Being human. The words hung between them like a challenge. When she leaned closer, when her hand touched his face, when their lips met, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as they discovered this new territory together. They held each other on the couch as the storm raged, talking in whispers about dreams and fears and the spaces between who they were and who they wanted to be. When they finally fell asleep, wrapped in a blue throw blanket, it felt like coming home. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, and with it came the return of Rowan's carefully constructed walls. Rowan woke first, his internal clock refusing to acknowledge that the world had changed overnight. For a moment, he lay still, feeling the unfamiliar weight of another person against his chest. Naya's dark hair spilled across his shoulder, her breathing steady and peaceful. The storm had passed, leaving behind a city wrapped in pristine white. Reality crashed over him like cold water. This was his employee. This was a complication he couldn't afford. This was exactly the kind of emotional entanglement that destroyed careers and compromised judgment. He extracted himself carefully, trying not to wake her, and retreated to his bedroom. In the shower, he scrubbed away the scent of her shampoo and the memory of her touch. By the time he emerged, dressed in his usual armor of expensive suits and polished shoes, he'd rebuilt every wall she'd helped him tear down. Naya was awake when he returned to the living room, folding the blue throw with the same careful attention she gave to everything. She'd smoothed her hair and straightened her clothes, but there was no hiding the intimacy of the night before. "Good morning," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "We need to talk." The words came out harsher than he intended, but he couldn't afford softness now, not when his phone was already buzzing with messages from his assistant. His board members, his entire world demanding his attention. Naya's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, last night was... He searched for words that would minimize the damage, reduce the night to something manageable. A mistake. The storm, the isolation, the wine. It created an artificial situation that doesn't reflect reality. She listened without interrupting, her face revealing nothing. But he saw the moment her professional mask slipped back into place, saw the warmth in her eyes cool to polite distance. "I understand," she said. "You're an excellent chef. Your work here has been exemplary. But we need to maintain appropriate boundaries going forward." Absolutely. Her agreement should have relieved him. Instead, it felt like a door slamming shut. "I have meetings all day," he continued, checking his phone as messages continued to flood in. "The Japanese investors want to reschedule for this afternoon. The merger documents need review before..." "Mr. Blackwell." Her voice cut through his rambling with quiet authority. When he looked up, she was standing with perfect posture, hands clasped. In front of her, every inch the professional chef he'd hired. "I'll prepare your breakfast, and then gather my things." "That's not necessary. We can move past this." "No," she said simply. "We can't." She walked to the kitchen with measured steps. No hurry, no drama. Within minutes, she'd prepared his usual breakfast: steel-cut oats, black coffee. Fresh fruit arranged with the precision that had impressed him from day one. She set the plate on his dining table and stepped back. "Your breakfast, sir." The formality cut deeper than anger would have. Sir, not Rowan, which she'd called him during their quiet conversations. Not the easy familiarity they'd developed over weeks of shared meals and careful conversations. Sir, the distance of employer and employee, nothing more. "Naya, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a small envelope, which she placed beside his coffee cup. Her handwriting on the front was neat and controlled. "Mr. Blackwell, my resignation," she said. "Effective immediately. I'll send someone to collect my knives later today." "This is unnecessary. This is necessary." She moved toward the elevator, her steps unhurried but final. At the doors, she turned back once. "Thank you for last night," she said. "It reminded me what I'm worth." The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and Rowan was alone with his breakfast and the envelope he couldn't bring himself to open. The envelope sat unopened beside his untouched breakfast for 3 hours. Rowan threw himself into work with desperate intensity, fielding calls from Tokyo, reviewing contracts for the Singapore expansion, approving marketing budgets that would have required careful consideration on any other day, but concentration eluded him. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted to that small white rectangle. Naya's handwriting was precise, controlled, like everything else about her. No flourishes, no emotional outbursts, just clean lines that somehow conveyed more dignity than a dozen dramatic speeches. When he finally opened it, the message was brief. "Mr. Blackwell, thank you for the opportunity to work in your home. I learned a great deal about cooking for someone who values excellence. Last night, you showed me a person I could respect. This morning, you reminded me why I need to protect my peace. I wish you success in all your endeavors. Naya Reid." No accusations, no demands, no threats or ultimatums. Just a quiet statement of fact that somehow felt more devastating than any emotional outburst could have been. His assistant called twice about the replacement chef. "The agency has 3 candidates available for interviews this afternoon," she reported. All highly qualified, excellent references. Fine, Rowan said, though the thought of someone else in his kitchen felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. The Japanese investors arrived at 2 p.m., full of apologies about the weather delay and eager to discuss the logistics partnership that would expand Blackwell Dynamics into new Asian markets. It was exactly the kind of deal Rowan lived for: complex, profitable, strategically brilliant. But as they talked numbers and timelines, his mind wandered to the empty kitchen, to the way Naya had moved through that space like she belonged there, to the patience in her voice when she taught him to hold a knife properly. Mr. Blackwell? The lead investor was looking at him expectantly. The profit projections for year 3? Rowan pulled his attention back to the conference table, to the spreadsheets and charts that usually commanded his complete focus. But even as he discussed market penetration and revenue streams, part of him remained in that kitchen, learning that good things take time. The interviews with potential chefs were disasters. The first candidate was technically proficient, but treated his kitchen like a laboratory, all precision and no soul. The second was creative but chatty, filling the space with unnecessary conversation when Rowan needed quiet efficiency. The third was perfect on paper, trained at Le Cordon Bleu, experience in Michelin-starred restaurants, impeccable references. "When can you start?" Rowan asked. "Immediately, sir. I've reviewed your dietary preferences and can have this week's menus prepared by tomorrow." It should have been exactly what he wanted. Professional competence without personal complications. But as the chef discussed meal planning and grocery sourcing, Rowan found himself thinking about tomato soup and grilled cheese, about the satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. That evening, alone in his penthouse, he stood in the kitchen where everything had changed. The space felt hollow now, all expensive equipment and no warmth. He opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents, ingredients that meant nothing to him. Components waiting for someone who understood how to transform them into nourishment. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Naya's contact information. His thumb hovered over her number for long minutes. What would he say? That he'd made a mistake? That he wanted her back? That the night they'd shared had meant more than he was willing to admit? But admitting that would mean acknowledging that his carefully constructed life was missing something essential. It would mean accepting that success without connection was just expensive loneliness. Instead, he put the phone away and ordered dinner from his usual restaurant. It arrived perfectly prepared and utterly tasteless, and he ate it alone while snow continued to fall outside his windows. 2 weeks after leaving Blackwell Tower, Naya sat in a clinic waiting room in Long Island City, staring at fluorescent lights that hummed with institutional indifference. The morning sickness had started subtle, a queasy feeling during her commute, an aversion to coffee that she'd attributed to stress. But when her period failed to arrive and the nausea intensified, reality demanded acknowledgement. The pregnancy test had shown 2 pink lines as clear as a verdict. Now she needed confirmation, needed to hear the words from someone in a white coat who could tell her what came next. "Naya Reed?" The nurse's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The examination room smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands, performed the ultrasound with practiced efficiency. The gel was cold against Naya's skin, the wand pressing gently as grainy images appeared on the monitor. "There's the heartbeat," Dr. Martinez said, pointing to a flickering spot on the screen. Strong and steady, Naya exhaled relief she didn't know she'd been holding. 1 heartbeat meant 1 baby, 1 future to plan, 1 life to figure out. "Wait." Dr. Martinez frowned, moving the wand slightly. "Let me get a better angle here." The silence stretched as the doctor adjusted the equipment, her expression growing more focused. Naya's chest tightened. Something was wrong. The baby wasn't developing properly. The heartbeat was irregular. Her worst fears began to multiply. "Well," Dr. Martinez said finally, a smile breaking across her face. "This is interesting. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but you're going to need a bigger car." Naya stared at the monitor, trying to make sense of the gray and white shapes that meant nothing to her untrained eye. "I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats," Dr. Martinez continued, pointing to different areas of the screen. "Congratulations, Ms. Reed. You're having triplets." The world tilted sideways. 3 babies. 3 lives depending on her. 3 futures she'd have to build alone. "Are you sure?" Completely sure. 3 healthy heartbeats, all developing normally. This is quite rare. Natural triplets occur in about 1 in 10,000 pregnancies. Naya lay back on the examination table, staring at the ceiling tiles while her entire future rewrote itself in real time. Naya's Aunt Celeste lived in a shotgun house in the Bywater, where music drifted from open windows and neighbors knew each other's names. The house was narrow but deep, with high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked with character. When Naya called from New York, voice shaking as she explained her situation, Celeste's response was immediate. "Baby girl, you come home. We'll figure this out together." Home. Naya hadn't thought of anywhere as home since leaving her mother's diner. But something about New Orleans felt right. The city moved at a different pace and valued different things. Here, family mattered more than profit margins. Community trumped competition. The flight from LaGuardia felt like traveling to another planet. As the plane descended over Lake Pontchartrain, Naya pressed her hand to her still, flat stomach and whispered promises to the 3 lives growing inside her. "You're going to be loved," she told them. "You're going to be safe. And you're never going to wonder if you matter." Celeste met her at Louis Armstrong International with arms wide and questions later. She was Naya's mother's younger sister, a woman who'd raised 4 children of her own and had enough love left over for anyone who needed it. "Look at you," Celeste said, holding Naya at arm's length. "Skinny as a rail but strong as steel. Just like your mama." The house smelled like coffee and beignets, like safety and second chances. Celeste had prepared the back bedroom with fresh sheets and wildflowers from her garden. A rocking chair sat by the window, already waiting for the babies who would arrive in 7 months. "I found you a job," Celeste announced over dinner. "Hotel Monteleone needs a line cook. Pays decent, hours are reasonable, and the chef's a good man who won't work you to death." "Aunt Celeste, I just got here. And you got 3 babies coming and bills to pay. No shame in working, baby girl. Shame on sitting still when you have the power to move." That night, Naya sat on the front porch, listening to jazz drift from Frenchman Street. Her hand rested on her stomach, and for the first time since seeing those 3 heartbeats, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Labor started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in September, 6 weeks before her due date. Naya woke to contractions that felt like her body was reorganizing itself from the inside out. Celeste drove through empty streets to Oxner Medical Center, talking steadily, to keep Naya calm while secretly praying they'd make it in time. "Breathe, baby," Celeste coached as another contraction peaked. "These babies are ready to meet their mama." The delivery room filled with medical staff, 2 doctors, 3 nurses, a neonatal team standing by. Triplets meant complications, meant risks, meant everything could change in seconds. But Dr. Rousseau, a soft-spoken man with gentle hands, radiated calm confidence. "We're going to take this slow and steady," he told Naya. "Your babies are small but strong, just like their mother." Kael arrived first at 6:47 a.m., announcing his presence with lungs that could wake the dead. 5 pounds, 2 ounces of pure determination, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "He's perfect," the nurse said, placing him briefly on Naya's chest before whisking him to the warming station. Ivy followed 12 minutes later, smaller and quieter but alert, her tiny fist wrapped around the umbilical cord like she was already taking charge. 4 pounds, 11 ounces of concentrated will. River came last, at 7:23 a.m., the smallest at 4 pounds. 6 ounces, but with a serenity that seemed to calm the entire room. He didn't cry immediately, just looked around with wide eyes as if he was taking inventory of his new world. 3 healthy babies, Dr. Rousseau announced. "Congratulations, Mama," Naya cried then, exhausted, overwhelmed, grateful tears that came from somewhere deeper than relief. When they finally brought all 3 babies to her, cleaned and swaddled, she looked into 6 eyes that carried pieces of a man who would never know they existed. "Hello, my loves," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to take care of you." Celeste stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Look what you did, baby girl. Look what you made." What Naya had made was a family. Small, unconventional, but complete. Those first months tested every ounce of strength Naya didn't know she possessed. 3 babies meant 3 feeding schedules that never quite aligned, 3 sets of diapers, 3 different personalities emerging from identical beginnings. Kyle was the demanding one, loud and insistent about his needs. Ivy was the observer, quiet but alert, studying everything with serious eyes. River was the peacemaker, content to wait his turn as long as someone was nearby. Sleep became a luxury measured in 20-minute intervals. Naya learned to function on caffeine and determination, to change diapers with one hand while feeding a bottle with the other. The house filled with the constant soundtrack of infant needs, crying, cooing, the soft sounds of babies discovering their voices. Celeste helped when she could, but she had her own job and grandchildren to tend. Neighbors brought casseroles and offered babysitting, but ultimately, the weight of 3 lives rested on Naya's shoulders alone. Some nights, when all 3 babies cried simultaneously, and nothing she tried brought comfort, Naya would sit on the floor of the nursery and cry with them. Not from despair, but from the overwhelming magnitude of love she felt for these tiny humans who depended on her completely. "We're going to be okay," she would tell them, her voice steady even when her hands shook from exhaustion. "Mama's got you. Mama's always going to have you." She returned to work when the babies were 3 months old, a decision that broke her heart but paid the bills. The chef at Hotel Monteleone was understanding, allowing her to pump milk during breaks and leave early when daycare called. But every day felt like a balancing act between providing for her children and being present for them. Here's what I need you to understand. Some of you watching this know exactly what Naya was going through. Maybe you're raising children alone, wondering if you're strong enough, smart enough, enough. Maybe you've faced a challenge that seemed impossible until you realized you had no choice but to be possible. Tell me in the comments about a time you discovered strength you didn't know you had. Because what Naya was building in New Orleans, while Rowan's world was about to crumble in New York, will show you that sometimes the greatest power comes not from having everything, but from making everything you have count. 18 months after Naya left, Rowan's world began to fracture in ways that quarterly reports couldn't predict. It started with StreamVault, the video platform he'd acquired for $2 billion. User engagement plummeted when a competitor launched with better features and lower costs. Advertisers pulled funding. Content creators jumped ship. The Miami logistics deal that had seemed bulletproof collapsed when environmental regulators discovered contaminated soil at 3 key sites. Legal fees mounted. Insurance companies balked. Partners who'd celebrated with champagne suddenly couldn't return his calls. Then Marcus Webb, his most trusted board member and longtime friend, leaked confidential merger documents to TechCrunch. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. Marcus had been best man at Rowan's parents' wedding, had taught him to sail during summers in the Hamptons, had been the closest thing to family Rowan allowed himself. "Why?" Rowan asked during their final confrontation in the Blackwell Tower boardroom. "Because you've become someone I don't recognize," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with disappointment. "The Rowan I knew had vision. This version just has ambition." Stock prices tumbled. Investors demanded explanations Rowan couldn't provide. The financial press, once eager to chronicle his successes, now dissected his failures with surgical precision. Headlines that had once praised his Midas touch now questioned his judgment crisis. For the first time in his adult life, Rowan Blackwell faced the possibility of genuine failure. Not just a bad quarter or a missed projection, but the complete collapse of everything he'd built. Dr. Sarah Chen's office near Bryant Park was nothing like Rowan expected. No leather couch, no intimidating diplomas covering the walls, just 2 comfortable chairs, a small table with tissues, and windows that looked out onto trees instead of skyscrapers. "What brings you here?" "Doctor," Chen asked during their first session. "My assistant suggested it," Rowan replied, which was partially true. What he didn't say was that he'd been standing on his balcony at 3 a.m., looking down at the street, 68 floors below, wondering if falling would hurt less than the hollow ache in his chest. "What would you like to work on?" "I don't know." The admission felt like swallowing glass. "Everything I touch turns to ash. People I trusted betrayed me. I can't sleep. I can't focus. Can't what?" "I can't remember why any of this mattered." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the last time you felt genuinely happy." The answer came without hesitation. A snowy night in his kitchen, learning to make soup while a woman with patient hands taught him that good things take time. But admitting that would mean acknowledging that he'd thrown away the best thing in his life for the sake of maintaining walls that were now crumbling anyway. "I don't remember," he lied. "That's okay. We'll work on remembering." Week after week, Dr. Chen asked questions that had no business being so difficult. When did you last cry? What scares you most? Who do you trust? What would you do if money wasn't a factor? Slowly, painfully, Rowan began to excavate the person buried beneath decades of armor. The first omelet was a disaster. Rowan stood in his kitchen, staring at scrambled eggs that looked like yellow concrete, wondering how something so simple could go so wrong. But he tried again the next morning, and the morning after that, until muscle memory began to replace confusion. Cooking became his meditation, the 1 hour each day when his mind couldn't race ahead to problems and projections. Chopping vegetables required presence. Timing pasta demanded attention. Seasoning taught him to trust his senses instead of spreadsheets. He bought cookbooks, real ones with food-stained pages and handwritten notes in the margins from previous owners. He watched YouTube videos of grandmothers in small kitchens, their hands moving with the confidence that came from feeding families for decades. The blue throw from that snowy night still lay folded on his couch. Sometimes he'd wrap it around his shoulders while eating meals he'd prepared himself, remembering the weight of another person's warmth, the sound of laughter mixing with wind against windows. He called his mother for the first time in 2 years, not about business or obligations, but just to talk. She cried when she heard his voice, really heard it, without the professional distance he usually maintained. "You sound different," she said. "I'm learning to cook. Your father never learned. Said it was women's work." A pause. "I always wished he had. Might have made him softer." Rowan understood now that softness wasn't weakness. It was the courage to remain open when everything urged you to close. While Rowan learned to crack eggs without breaking yolks, Naya was teaching 3 toddlers to walk. While he practiced knife skills on carrots that refused to cooperate, she was cutting their food into tiny pieces, making sure each bite was safe. He didn't know that Kyle had taken his first steps in the Hotel Monteleone kitchen, wobbling between prep stations while the staff cheered. He didn't know that Ivy's first word was more, spoken while pointing at a bowl of rice and beans. He didn't know that River hummed while he ate, a contented sound that made everyone around him smile. Rowan's therapy sessions revealed patterns he'd never recognized. His need to control everything stemmed from a childhood where nothing felt secure. His fear of emotional intimacy traced back to parents who treated love like a business transaction. His dismissal of weakness was really terror of being seen as human. Meanwhile, Naya was discovering her own strength. She'd been promoted to sous chef, her creativity and leadership earning respect in a kitchen full of seasoned professionals. Local food critics began mentioning her dishes specifically. A photo of her appeared in New Orleans magazine, smiling while holding a plate of her signature black and red fish. Both of them were growing, changing, becoming versions of themselves they'd never imagined possible. Rowan was learning that vulnerability was a form of courage. Naya was proving that independence didn't mean isolation. Neither knew that their paths were about to cross again, in a city that specialized in second chances. 3 years after arriving in New Orleans with nothing but determination and 3 babies on the way, Naya Reed stood in the Hotel Monteleone kitchen holding a crystal award that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. The New Orleans Culinary Excellence Award for Innovation sat heavy in her hands. Recognition for her signature dish that had put the hotel's restaurant on the national food map. Blackened red fish with corn and okra relish, finished with a lime cilantro oil that brightened every bite. The dish told the story of Louisiana. Bold, complex, rooted in tradition, but unafraid to evolve. Food critics, from Atlanta to San Francisco, had made pilgrimages to taste what one reviewer called poetry on a plate. Mama Naya. Kyle's voice echoed through the kitchen as he toddled toward her, followed closely by Ivy and River. At 2.5, they moved through the hotel kitchen like they owned it, charming staff who spoiled them with tastes of bread and gentle hugs. Chef Boudreau, a man who'd worked these kitchens for 30 years, wiped his eyes as he watched Naya lift each child to see her award. "You did this, Cher," he said, his voice thick with pride. "You took our little restaurant and made it sing." The local newspaper wanted an interview. Food Network had called twice. A cookbook publisher was interested in her story. But as Naya looked at her children's faces, bright with excitement, they didn't fully understand. She knew her greatest achievement wasn't the award in her hands. It was the family she'd built from scratch, the life she'd created through sheer will and endless love. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Naya was teaching Ivy to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. The number was unfamiliar, the area code distinctly New York. "Miss Reed, this is Catherine Morrison from the Children's Health Foundation. We're hosting our annual gala at the Plaza Hotel next month, and we'd like you to design the menu." Naya's hand stilled on the whisk she'd been using to demonstrate proper scrambling technique. New York, the city she'd left with her heart in pieces and her future uncertain. "I'm honored," she said carefully, "but I'm based in New Orleans. Surely there are excellent chefs in New York who could—" "We specifically want you," Catherine interrupted. "Your reputation has reached us here. The Foundation's board includes several food industry leaders who've heard remarkable things about your work. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation, plus travel and accommodation for you and your family." Family. The word hung in the air as Naya watched her 3 children play with wooden spoons and measuring cups on the kitchen floor. They'd never been on an airplane. They'd never seen snow. They'd never experienced the city where their father lived, unknowing of their existence. "The event is quite high profile," Catherine continued. "Tech leaders, finance executives, media personalities. It's an opportunity to showcase your talents to a national audience." Naya closed her eyes, seeing herself 3 years ago, packing her knives and her dignity, walking away from a man who'd called their night together a mistake. She'd built a new life since then, become someone who didn't need anyone's approval or recognition. But maybe it was time to show that life to the world that had once dismissed her. "I'll need full creative control over the menu," she said. The flight to New York was Kyle, Ivy, and River's first adventure in the sky. They pressed their faces to the airplane windows, marveling at clouds that looked like cotton and cities that resembled toy sets. Naya held River on her lap during takeoff, his small hand gripping hers as the plane lifted away from everything familiar. She'd booked a suite at a hotel near Central Park, far from Tribeca and the memories that lived in those glass towers. The children would stay with a carefully vetted babysitter during the gala preparation, but Naya wanted them to experience the city that had shaped part of their story, even if they'd never know the full truth. In her hotel room that first night, after the children had fallen asleep in the adjoining bedroom, Naya stood at the window looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in that forest of lights was Blackwell Tower, where a man who'd never learned her middle name had unknowingly fathered 3 children who carried his eyes and his stubborn chin. She'd Googled him once, about a year ago, during a moment of weakness. The articles painted a picture of professional struggles, failed deals, and empire under pressure. Part of her had felt vindicated, karma collecting its debt, but mostly, she'd felt nothing. The man who'd broken her heart had become a stranger whose problems weren't her concern. Her phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. "You strong enough for this, baby girl?" Naya looked at her sleeping children, at the life she'd built through determination, and Grace, at the woman she'd become when no one was watching. "I'm strong enough for anything," she typed back. The Plaza Hotel ballroom hummed with controlled chaos as Naya directed her team through final preparations. Ice sculptures gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Servers moved in and practiced choreography, carrying trays of her carefully crafted appetizers. The air smelled of saffron and possibility. She wore chef's whites that fit like armor, her hair pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn years ago in a different kitchen. But everything else had changed. Her posture carried confidence earned through struggle. Her voice held authority that came from leading teams and raising children. Her eyes reflected strength that no one could take away. The kitchen doors swung open as she plated the final course. Duck breast with cherry gastropub, and truffle potatoes, a dish that balanced richness with brightness, tradition with innovation. She looked up to see the event coordinator approaching with a tall figure in an expensive suit. Time stopped. Rowan Blackwell stood 10 feet away, older than she remembered, his face carrying lines that spoke of sleepless nights and hard-won wisdom. His hair was still perfectly styled, his suit still impeccable, but something fundamental had shifted. The arrogance she remembered had been replaced by something quieter, more uncertain. Their eyes met across the bustling kitchen, and the noise around them faded to white static. 3 years collapsed into a single moment of recognition that hit like lightning. He looked exactly the same. He looked completely different. He looked like the father of her children, though he'd never know it. "Ms. Reed," the coordinator was saying, "I'd like you to meet one of our major sponsors, Rowan Blackwell." Naya's hands remained steady as she set down her knife and turned to face the man who'd changed her life forever. "Mr. Blackwell." Naya's voice was perfectly controlled, professional courtesy masking the earthquake happening beneath her ribs. "Thank you for supporting tonight's event, Ms. Reed." He stepped forward, extending his hand. When their fingers touched in a brief handshake, electricity shot up her arm like muscle memory. "I've heard remarkable things about your work." "That's kind of you to say." The coordinator beamed, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. "Naya has created the most exquisite menu. The duck course alone is worth the ticket price." Rowan's eyes never left Naya's face. She could see him cataloging changes, the confidence in her posture, the authority in her voice, the way her team looked to her for direction. This wasn't the woman who'd left his penthouse with quiet dignity. This was someone who'd built her own kingdom. "I'm sure it will be exceptional," he said. "You always had remarkable talent." The words carried weight that made her chest tight. Always. As if he'd known her for years instead of months. As if their time together had been significant, instead of a mistake he'd dismissed with morning light. "If you'll excuse me," Naya said, turning back to her station. "Service begins in 20 minutes. "Of course." But he didn't move immediately. "Naya." She looked back, and for a moment, his professional mask slipped. She saw something raw in his expression, something that looked almost like regret. "It's good to see you," he said quietly. "You too." The lie came easily, but as he walked away, Naya's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her knife. 3 years of healing, and he could still affect her with a single look. The gala proceeded flawlessly. Guests praised every course, from the delicate amuse-bouche to the decadent chocolate finale. Naya moved between kitchen and dining room, accepting compliments with gracious professionalism, while her mind remained hyper-aware of Rowan's presence at table 12. He ate slowly, she noticed during her brief appearances in the dining room. Not the efficient fuel consumption she remembered, but actual appreciation for flavors and textures. When their eyes met across the room, he raised his wine glass in a small salute that made her heart skip. After the final course was served and the kitchen began its cleanup ritual, Naya found herself alone in the service corridor, finally allowing herself to breathe. The evening had been a triumph, but seeing Rowan again had reopened wounds she'd thought were fully healed. Exceptional work tonight. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, having somehow navigated past security and staff to find her in this quiet space. "Thank you. The foundation should be pleased with the fundraising results." "I wasn't talking about the fundraising." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, different from what he'd worn before, warmer somehow. "You've built something remarkable, Naya. Your reputation extends far beyond New Orleans." "I had good motivation." "Which was?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. She could tell him about 3 toddlers sleeping in a hotel suite 12 blocks away, about the motivation that came from knowing 3 lives depended on her success. She could watch his face change as he realized what his morning after rejection had cost them all. Instead, she said, "I learned to value myself properly." The next morning, Naya pushed a triple stroller through Central Park, while Kyle, Ivy, and River marveled at squirrels and pigeons. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. She dressed the children in their best outfits, tiny jeans and colorful sweaters, that made them look like a magazine advertisement for perfect childhood. They stopped near Bethesda Fountain, where the children could watch ducks paddle across the water. Naya sat on a bench, enjoying the rare moment of peace while her 3 miracles pointed at everything with the wonder that made ordinary moments magical. "Duck," Kyle announced, his vocabulary expanding daily. "Big duck," Ivy added, not to be outdone by her brother. River simply clapped his hands, his quiet joy infectious as always. "They're beautiful." Naya's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice, had heard it in her dreams and nightmares for 3 years. Slowly she turned to see Rowan standing 20 feet away, his morning run apparently forgotten, as he stared at her children with an expression she couldn't read. He was closer now than he'd been at the gala, close enough for her to see the exact moment recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went white as he took in 3 small faces that carried unmistakable pieces of his own features. Kyle had his eyes, that distinctive gray-green that photographers had always loved. Ivy had his stubborn chin, and the way he tilted his head when concentrating. River had his hands, long fingers that would probably play piano or type code with the same precision. How old are they? Rowan's voice was barely a whisper. Naya stood slowly, positioning herself between Rowan and the stroller like a shield. Her children continued their innocent chatter, unaware that their world was about to shift in ways they couldn't understand. 2.5, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Rowan's face went through a series of calculations, dates, timelines, the mathematics of conception and birth. She watched him arrive at the truth and saw the moment it hit him with the force of a freight train. Are they? He stopped, swallowed hard, and tried again. Are they safe? Of all the questions he could have asked, are they mine? Why didn't you tell me? How could you keep this from me? He asked the only one that mattered. The question of a father, not an owner. The question of someone who cared about their well-being before his own rights. They are safe, Naya replied, and something in her chest loosened slightly. They are healthy. They are loved. Rowan sank onto the bench beside her, his legs apparently unable to support him anymore. He stared at the children with wonder and terror warring across his features. Names, he said, the word coming out like a prayer. Kyle, Ivy, and River. Triplets. Natural conception. 1 in 10,000 odds, the doctor said. Kyle chose that moment to toddle over to Rowan, drawn by some invisible force. He stood directly in front of this stranger, studying his face with the serious concentration he applied to everything new. Hi, Kyle said, his small voice clear and confident. Rowan's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. Hello, he whispered back. I failed you, Rowan said, his voice breaking as Kyle returned to his siblings, apparently satisfied with his inspection of this new person. You chose pride over people, Naya corrected. I chose peace over drama. I want to help now. I want to be part of their lives. Naya had imagined this conversation 1,000 times during sleepless nights and quiet moments. She'd rehearsed angry speeches and dignified rejections, had planned exactly how she'd protect her children from a man who'd proven himself unreliable when it mattered most. But sitting here, watching him look at their children with naked love and terror, she found herself considering possibilities she'd never allowed herself to explore. Help requires proof, not promises, she said finally. These children have never needed you. They have a life, a routine, people who love them unconditionally. If you want to be part of that, you earn it slowly. Tell me how. Supervised visits, public places only, no gifts without discussion, no promises you can't keep, no disruption to their stability. Rowan nodded eagerly. Whatever you need, whatever they need. This isn't about what you need, Rowan. This is about 3 children who deserve consistency, not chaos. They deserve someone who shows up, not someone who runs when things get complicated. I understand. Do you? Because the man I knew 3 years ago called love a weakness and treated people like business transactions. These children need more than your money or your guilt. They need someone who will put them first, always. I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago. Prove it. As they sat in the shadow of Bethesda Fountain, watching 3 toddlers discover the magic of fallen leaves, Naya felt the weight of a decision that would shape 4 lives forever. Rowan had hurt her deeply, but these children deserved the chance to know their father, if he could prove himself worthy of that privilege. 1 afternoon a week, she said finally. Playground visits. You learn their routines, their personalities, their needs. You show up when you say you will. You leave when I say it's time. And if I prove myself, then we'll see. Rowan watched River clap his hands at a passing dog, watched Ivy carefully arrange leaves, in a pattern only she understood, and watched Kyle attempt to climb everything in sight. His children. The word felt foreign and familiar at the same time. They're perfect, he whispered. They're human, Naya corrected. They have tantrums and bad days and moments when they test every boundary. They're not perfect, they're real. I want to learn. I want to be what they need. Then you'll have to learn patience. You'll have to learn that love is action, not feeling. You'll have to learn that being a father means showing up for the small moments, not just the big ones. Here's what I want to know from everyone watching. Have you ever had to decide whether to give someone a second chance? Maybe it was a parent who let you down, a partner who broke your trust, a friend who chose themselves over your friendship. How do you balance protecting yourself with the possibility of healing? Share your story in the comments, because what happens next will test everything Naya and Rowan. The playground near West 72nd Street became Rowan's classroom in humility. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m., he met Naya and the children at the same bench, carrying a diaper bag that felt heavier than any briefcase he'd ever owned. The first lesson came immediately. Toddlers operated on their own timeline, not his. Down. Kyle demanded the moment he saw the swings, his small body already straining against the stroller straps. Rowan looked to Naya for guidance. In boardrooms, he commanded attention with a single glance. Here, a 2-year-old's wishes carried more weight than his decades of experience. He wants to swing, Naya explained patiently. You unbuckle him, lift him out, and help him into the swing seat. Simple instructions that felt impossibly complex. Rowan's hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts, fumbled with tiny buckles designed for much smaller fingers. Kyle grew impatient, his voice rising in frustration. Like this, Naya demonstrated with Ivy, her movements smooth and practiced. Support his back, watch his legs, make sure he's secure before you let go. Rowan finally managed to free Kyle from the stroller, lifting his son for the first time. The boy was heavier than expected, solid and warm and real in ways that made Rowan's chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. Swing. Kyle pointed toward his destination with the authority of a tiny general. The first diaper change happened 3 weeks into their playground routine. River had an accident that required immediate attention, and Naya was dealing with Ivy's scraped knee from an ambitious climbing attempt. Can you handle this? She asked, gesturing toward River, who sat contentedly despite his obvious need for fresh clothes. Rowan stared at the diaper bag like it contained nuclear codes. I've never. First time for everything? The process was more complex than any merger he'd negotiated. Wipes that tore if pulled too quickly, tabs that stuck to everything except where they belonged. River, meanwhile, treated the entire experience as entertainment, giggling and trying to grab everything within reach. Talk to him, Naya coached from nearby. He likes to know what's happening. Okay, River, Rowan said awkwardly. We're going to get you cleaned up. River responded with a stream of babble that sounded almost conversational, as if he was offering helpful suggestions for the process. By the 4th week, Rowan had mastered the art of distraction during tantrums. Kyle's meltdown over a broken cookie led to the discovery that his son loved train sounds. Ivy's tears over a lost toy stopped when Rowan started humming, badly, but with enough enthusiasm to make her giggle. He created a playlist on his phone, Gentle Afternoon, soft instrumental music that seemed to calm all 3 children during fussy moments. Consistency became Rowan's religion. Every Wednesday, 3 p.m. sharp, regardless of board meetings or conference calls. He rearranged his entire schedule around those 2 hours, treating them as the most important appointments of his week. The children began to recognize him, their faces lighting up when they saw him approaching the playground. Kyle would run toward him with arms outstretched. Ivy would shyly offer him whatever treasure she'd found, a pretty leaf, a smooth stone, a flower picked from the park gardens. River would simply smile, his quiet contentment speaking volumes. They trust you, Naya observed one afternoon, watching Rowan push all 3 children on swings simultaneously, a feat that required the coordination of a symphony conductor. I'm learning their language, he replied, catching Ivy as she jumped from her swing with fearless abandon. Kale needs constant motion, Ivy needs gentle encouragement. River needs to know you're present, even when you're quiet. The breakthrough came during week 6, when Kyle fell and scraped his palm on the playground's rubber surface. Instead of running to Naya, he turned to Rowan, tears streaming down his face, arms reaching up for comfort. Rowan scooped him up without hesitation, murmuring soothing words while examining the minor injury. You're okay, buddy, just a little scrape. We'll clean it up. For the first time, he felt like a father instead of a visitor. The Children's Health Foundation approached Naya for a second event, a larger gala, at the Brooklyn Museum with twice the guests and 3 times the media attention. This time, Rowan offered to underwrite the entire event without requiring naming rights or recognition. Why? Naya asked during one of their playground meetings, watching him help River navigate the climbing structure with patient hands. "Because it matters to you," he said simply, "and because these children deserve a world where healthcare isn't a luxury." The night of the gala, Rowan arrived early to help with setup. He wore a simple black suit instead of his usual designer armor, and he worked alongside catering staff to arrange tables and test sound equipment. When photographers arrived, he directed them away from the kitchen areas where Naya was working. "Mr. Blackwell," a reporter from Page 6 approached him during cocktail hour. "Can you comment on your relationship with tonight's chef? Sources say you have a personal connection." "I can comment on her exceptional talent," Rowan replied smoothly. "Miss Reed is one of the finest chefs in the country. Tonight's menu speaks for itself. But the personal angle, there is no personal angle that's appropriate for public discussion. If you'll excuse me, I believe dinner is about to be served." The restraint cost him. Every instinct honed by years of public relations told him to control the narrative, to shape the story before others could twist it. But protecting Naya and the children mattered more than managing his image. When a gossip blogger posted photos of him at the playground, speculating about his mystery family, Rowan's legal team sent cease and desist letters within hours. When a tabloid offered money for information about his secret children, he had his security team investigate the source and shut down the inquiry. "You could have used this," Naya said during their next playground meeting, showing him the positive coverage of the gala that focused on the fundraising success rather than personal speculation. "Good publicity for your company." "My company doesn't need publicity built on my children's privacy," he replied, watching Kyle attempt to teach a pigeon to play catch. They didn't choose this life. They deserve to grow up without cameras following them. The decision sent ripples through his business relationships. Board members questioned his new priorities. Investors worried about his softened approach. But Rowan found he cared less about their opinions and more about the trust, building in 3 pairs of eyes that looked more like his every day. His assistant learned to schedule around playground time. His driver knew the route to West 72nd Street by heart. Privacy protection became a full-time operation. Rowan hired a discreet security firm to monitor social media for any photos or mentions of the children. He established a trust fund for their future education and healthcare, structured to provide support without creating dependency. "I want them to choose their own paths," he told his lawyer during the trust setup. "This money should open doors, not define their worth." He also began the delicate process of introducing the children to his world, carefully, gradually, always with Naya's approval. A visit to his office on a Saturday when the building was empty, letting them explore the conference room and play with the adjustable chairs. A trip to the company's test kitchen, where they could safely touch and taste while supervised. "Daddy work?" Ivy asked, her vocabulary expanding to include the concept that this tall man who pushed swings had another life beyond the playground. The word daddy hit Rowan like lightning. He looked to Naya, who nodded slightly, permission to claim the title he was still earning. "Yes," he said, kneeling to Ivy's level. "Daddy works here sometimes, but the playground is more important." "Playground better," Kyle agreed solemnly, as if settling a crucial business decision. "Much better," Rowan confirmed, meaning every word. The changes at Blackwell Dynamics reflected Rowan's personal evolution. He restructured the company's parental leave policy, extending paid time off for new parents and adding on-site childcare at the New York headquarters. The employee retention rate improved dramatically. "You're running a business, not a charity," Marcus Webb commented during a tense board meeting. He'd returned as an investor after Rowan's public apology and financial restructuring, but their relationship remained strained. "I'm running a sustainable business," Rowan corrected. "Happy employees are productive employees. Supported families create loyal workers. This isn't charity, it's smart management." The quarterly reports supported his approach. While revenue growth had slowed, profit margins improved as employee turnover decreased and productivity increased. The company's reputation shifted from ruthless efficiency to innovative leadership, attracting top talent who wanted to work for an organization that valued human dignity. Rowan instituted Family First Fridays, where employees could leave early for school events or family obligations without penalty. He started each board meeting by asking about members' children and grandchildren, transforming the corporate culture from the top down. "You've gone soft," one investor complained. "I've gone human," Rowan replied. And it's the best business decision I've ever made. The playground had taught him that the most important metrics couldn't be measured in spreadsheets. They were measured in trust, laughter, and the weight of small hands reaching for yours. Winter tested every boundary they'd carefully established. When a stomach bug swept through the children's daycare, all three came down, with fevers that spiked at 2 a.m. and left them crying inconsolably. Naya, exhausted from 2 sleepless nights, called Rowan without thinking. "I need help," she said, her voice cracking with fatigue. "They're all sick, and I can't be in 3 places at once." Rowan arrived within 20 minutes, still in pajamas under his coat, carrying a pharmacy's worth of children's medicine and electrolyte solutions. He took River, who was running the highest fever, while Naya tended to Kyle and Ivy. "Rock him gently," she instructed, showing him how to hold their son to ease his congestion. "Sing something soft." Rowan's voice was rough with worry as he hummed a half-remembered lullaby, but River settled against his chest, a tiny fist gripping his father's shirt. They spent the night in shifts, one sleeping while the other monitored temperatures and administered medicine. "You don't have to stay," Naya said around 4 a.m., finding him changing River's fever-soaked pajamas with practiced efficiency. "Yes, I do," he replied simply. "They're my children too." The crisis passed by morning, but something fundamental had shifted. They'd moved from scheduled visits to genuine partnership, from careful boundaries to shared responsibility. When Ivy woke up asking for daddy instead of just mama, Naya realized their family structure had evolved beyond her original plan. Co-parenting meant compromise, communication, and the constant negotiation of 2 adults learning to put 3 children's needs above their own comfort zones. The shareholder meeting at the Beacon Theater drew national media attention. Blackwell Dynamics had weathered its crisis and emerged stronger, but questions remained about Rowan's leadership and personal life. Instead of deflecting, he chose transparency. 3 years ago, I made decisions that hurt someone I cared about, he said, standing at the podium without notes or teleprompters. I let pride override compassion, fear override love. I called emotional connection a weakness, when it's actually the foundation of all meaningful success. The audience, investors, employees, media, listened in stunned silence as he continued. I'm here today not just as your CEO, but as a father learning that accountability isn't a quarterly report. It's showing up every day, especially when it's difficult. It's admitting mistakes and working to earn forgiveness, not demanding it. He outlined the company's new direction: sustainable growth over aggressive expansion, employee well-being over profit maximization, long-term value over short-term gains. Some of you may question these priorities. You may prefer the old version of this company and the old version of me, but I've learned that building something lasting requires building something worth keeping. When a reporter asked about his personal transformation, Rowan's answer was direct. I met someone who showed me what strength really looks like. She walked away when I failed to value what we had. She built a life that didn't need my approval or my money. She taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the courage to be vulnerable with someone who's earned that trust. The breakthrough came during a rainy Saturday in Rowan's penthouse. The children had been cranky all morning, cooped up by weather that made playground visits impossible. Naya suggested they cook together, all 5 of them crowding into the kitchen that had once been Rowan's sterile showpiece. "Pancakes," Kyle announced, as if he'd solved a complex mathematical equation. "From scratch," Naya added, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Everyone helps." Rowan found himself measuring flour while Ivy stood on a step stool beside him, carefully counting scoops. River sat in his high chair, banging wooden spoons against metal bowls in a rhythm that somehow worked. Kyle attempted to crack eggs, creating more mess than progress, but radiating pure joy. "You're getting better at this," Naya observed, watching Rowan flip pancakes with growing confidence. "I had a good teacher." Their eyes met across the kitchen, and for the first time since that snowy night years ago, the connection felt natural instead of complicated. They moved around each other with easy familiarity, passing ingredients and sharing smiles while their children created chaos and laughter in equal measure. When they finally sat down to eat, syrup dripping and voices overlapping as everyone talked at once, Rowan felt something he'd never experienced before. Contentment, not the satisfaction of closing a deal or the rush of beating competitors, but the quiet happiness of being exactly where he belonged. "This is nice," Ivy said, syrup on her chin and joy in her voice. "Yes," Rowan agreed, looking at his family. "This is perfect." 6 months later, Rowan stood in that same kitchen, 3 small velvet boxes hidden behind the coffee maker. He'd spent weeks planning this moment, not in a restaurant or on a beach, but in the space where they'd learned to be a family. The children were helping him make dinner, their new Saturday tradition. Kyle stirred sauce with intense concentration. Ivy arranged vegetables in careful patterns. River clapped his hands whenever something sizzled in the pan. "Naya," Rowan said, his voice steadier than his hands as he reached for the hidden boxes. "There's something I want to ask you." She looked up from the pasta she was draining, steam rising around her face like a halo. "What's that?" He knelt down, bringing himself to the children's eye level, and opened the 3 small boxes. Inside each was a simple silver ring, sized for tiny fingers. "Kyle, Ivy, River," he said solemnly, "I want to ask your mama to marry me. But first I need to ask if you'll have me as your daddy, really and truly forever." 3 pairs of eyes stared at the rings with wonder. Kyle reached for him immediately, trying to put it on his thumb. Ivy studied hers carefully before nodding approval. River simply giggled and clapped. "What do you say?" Rowan asked them. "Should we ask Mama to marry us?" "Yes," Kyle shouted. "Pretty ring," Ivy whispered. River babbled something that sounded like agreement. Rowan looked up at Naya, who stood frozen with the pasta strainer in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Naya Reed," he said, "will you marry us?" The engagement announcement brought media attention they couldn't avoid. Photographers camped outside Naya's hotel when she returned to New Orleans to pack her life. Tabloids speculated about prenups and power dynamics. Social media buzzed with opinions about their fairy tale romance. "Billionaire's secret family revealed," screamed one headline. "From chef to Mrs. CEO," proclaimed another. Naya read them all, her stomach churning with each invasive detail and manufactured controversy. When a particularly vicious blog post questioned her motives and called her a gold digger who trapped a vulnerable man, she nearly called off the engagement. "This is what your life looks like," she told Rowan during a late-night phone call. "Constant scrutiny, people picking apart every decision. Is this what you want for our children?" "I want you," he said simply. "I want our family. Everything else is just noise that follows you everywhere. Then we'll face it together." He flew to New Orleans the next day, not for business or publicity, but to pack boxes alongside her. When photographers caught them loading a moving truck, he didn't hide or deflect. He simply said, "We're building a life together. That's the only story that matters." The pictures that ran in the papers showed a man in jeans and a t-shirt, carrying boxes and chasing toddlers, looking nothing like the cold CEO the media had portrayed for years. Public opinion began to shift as people saw genuine moments instead of manufactured drama. "Maybe," Naya said, watching him assemble a crib in their new apartment, "we can handle the noise after all." They moved into a brownstone in Park Slope, choosing neighborhood over prestige, community over isolation. The house had a backyard where the children could play safely, a kitchen large enough for family cooking projects, and bedrooms that felt like homes instead of hotel suites. Sunday pancakes became sacred. Every week, all 5 of them crowded into the kitchen, creating chaos and memories in equal measure. Rowan learned that Kyle liked his pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Ivy preferred hers cut into perfect squares, and River was happy as long as someone was singing while they cooked. They established Gratitude Fridays, where each person shared something good from their week. Kyle usually mentioned trains or playground adventures. Ivy talked about books or new words she'd learned. River's contributions were mostly babble, but his enthusiasm was infectious. Bedtime stories became collaborative efforts. Rowan would start a tale about brave knights or friendly dragons, and the children would add details that sent the plot in unexpected directions. Naya would provide voices for different characters, creating a theatrical experience that left everyone laughing. Once upon a time, Rowan began one evening. There was a dragon who was afraid of fire. He ate ice cream instead. Kyle added. Purple ice cream, Ivy specified. With sprinkles, River contributed, though his version sounded more like sprinkles. These weren't the traditions Rowan had grown up with, formal dinners and scheduled activities. These were organic moments that grew from love and laughter, creating the foundation for memories that would last lifetimes. The wedding took place in Prospect Park's Rose Garden on a September afternoon when the light fell golden through the trees. 50 guests sat in simple white chairs, watching as Kyle, Ivy, and River walked down the aisle carrying flower petals they scattered with more enthusiasm than precision. Naya wore a dress the color of champagne, simple and elegant, with her grandmother's pearls at her throat. Rowan wore a navy suit and a smile that hadn't left his face all week. The officiant spoke about love that grows through adversity, about families built on choice rather than chance, about the courage required to trust again after being hurt. Do you, Rowan, promise to love and protect this family? I do. Do you, Naya, promise to build this life together? I do. When they kissed, the children cheered. When they turned to face their guests as a married family, River clapped his hands and Ivy threw more flower petals, and Kyle announced loudly, "Cake now?" Their life settled into rhythms that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Rowan walked the children to preschool each morning, learning the names of other parents and the politics of playground equipment. Naya opened a small restaurant called Gentle Hearth, where the food told stories of love and second chances. Evenings were for family dinners around a table that bore the marks of real life: crayon stains, water rings, the dent from when Kyle had enthusiastically demonstrated his drumming skills with wooden spoons. Weekends meant farmers markets and library story time, birthday parties for classmates, and quiet afternoons in the backyard. Rowan learned to braid Ivy's hair and tie Kyle's shoes. Naya taught him to read the subtle signs that meant River needed a nap or Ivy was getting overwhelmed. They fought sometimes, about discipline strategies and screen time limits, about work schedules and family obligations, but they fought as partners, not adversaries, always returning to the foundation they'd built on respect and shared commitment to their children's well-being. Let me tell you what this story is really about. It's not about a billionaire who got the girl. It's not about a woman who landed a rich husband. It's about two people who learned that love without respect is just attraction, and attraction without commitment is just entertainment. Naya didn't wait for Rowan to rescue her. She rescued herself. She built a life that didn't need his money or his status. When he came back into her world, she didn't fall into his arms. She made him prove he'd changed, not with grand gestures, but with daily choices. Rowan didn't win Naya back with wealth or power. He earned her trust by showing up consistently, by putting their children's needs before his own comfort, by choosing vulnerability over control. Real love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about becoming someone worthy of the love you want to receive. It's about boundaries that protect peace, not walls that prevent connection. It's about choosing each other every day, especially when it's difficult. If you're in a relationship, ask yourself, do you respect your partner's boundaries? Do you show up consistently? Do you choose love over pride when conflict arises? If you're single, ask yourself, are you becoming someone you'd want to love? Before I leave you with the final scene, I want you to do something. Look at your life right now. Are you building something that will matter in 10 years? Are you choosing connection over convenience? Are you brave enough to be vulnerable with someone who's earned that trust? Drop a comment and tell me about a time someone showed you what real love looks like. Not movie love or social media love, but the kind that shows up when you're sick, that chooses patience over pride, that builds something lasting instead of just exciting. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. That coming back isn't about forgetting. It's about forgiving with wisdom. A Tuesday evening in October. The brownstone glowed with warm light as Rowan flipped pancakes, while Kyle supervised from his step stool. Ivy arranged berries in careful patterns. River banged spoons against his high chair tray, conducting an orchestra only he could hear. Naya stirred cinnamon into maple syrup, watching her family with quiet contentment. This wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she'd chosen. Messy, imperfect, real. They sat around their scarred oak table, holding hands for grace, steam rising from plates, while small voices filled the room with stories from their day. Love had won, not through grand gestures, but through showing up, one small choice at a time.